GM, everyone. Welcome to the Mighty Action Heroes and Neo Tokyo AMA. We're going to go ahead and get started in just a few minutes.
GM, what's going on, Ben? How we doing?
Oh, good in the neighborhood. Wonderful day here in Web3 land. How about yourself?
Same here, my friend. Beautiful day here in Denver. Stoked to get into some Mighty Action Heroes.
Yeah. Can we do a quick mic check? Coco, how we doing? Legend.
GM Ben, lovely to be here. I think that's Cryptotheus. Yeah, it is Cryptotheus. I just saw your PFP. Yeah, welcome. It's so good to be on stage again with you both. Long time. Yeah, and repping Mighty Action Heroes today.
Hell yeah, great to have you on, Coco. I believe we're also joined today by Simon and Michael. How you guys doing?
Hey, thanks for having me on today. I'm really excited to get to meet you guys for the first time and kind of share a space with you.
Jim. Also, yeah, thanks for having me as well. I know Coco has been a big fan of Neo Tokyo, so very stoked to be here.
And a critical part of it.
That's right.
Awesome. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. We've done our mic checks. Everybody can hear everybody, which is good. So let's go ahead and lay a little bit of foundation. First of all, I just want to welcome everybody to the Mighty Action Heroes of Neo Tokyo AMA. Special thanks to everybody who is here live, and thank you to all those who are tuning in later. But let's go ahead and lay a foundation down. Would love to get a little bit of the story and the background behind all three of you. Keep in mind we do have a full hour, so don't be afraid to go into a little bit of long form here. Would love to get the background story, you guys and gals.
Sure, I guess I'll go first. So yeah, I'm Simon. I'm the CEO at Mighty Bear Games. So I've been making games now since 2004. So I'm so old that the very first console I worked on was a PS2. So yeah, I've worked for a number of big companies down the years, starting with doing projects for the likes of EA and Xbox. Wound up at Ubisoft for a time as well, which basically enabled me to move from Europe to Asia. So I was part of the team that was building an online shooter called Ghost Recon Online, which was led out of Singapore. Off the back of that, I ended up at King, which is the maker of Candy Crush. So I got my kind of start into mobile gaming and casual. And there I met a bunch of incredible people. Luckily for me, the studio basically decided, well, the management decided they wanted to relocate the studio to Europe. And so I was able to kind of take the best 8, 9 people from that studio and start Mighty Bear in 2016. Since then, we've shipped, I think, 6 full titles and close to 30 experiences in Fortnite on UEFN. We worked with the likes of Apple, so we made a shooter called Battle Royale, which was a food fight. That was one of the top performing games on Apple Arcade. We worked with Disney, so we made a game like League of Legends, which was Disney Mania. So it was a mobile, all these different Disney characters. I did pretty well for us as well. And in 2021, I decided that we would go all in on Web3. And so Mighty Action Heroes represents the very first Web3 game we made. But in addition to that, we are just starting on a new initiative, which we're going to be sharing a lot more about in the next few days. I'm very excited about that. And maybe I'll let Coco pick up and kind of speak to that. Yeah, that shocked face emoji. So yeah, I guess I'll hand over to Coco.
Yeah, Simon, thanks. Well, everybody, I guess, knows who I am, but just as a quick rundown, hi everyone, I'm Coco. I have a bit of a more eclectic career. I started off in very briefly in banking and realized, nah, it's not for me. And then ended up just learning sort of my sort of sales and marketing skills at a company called Procter and Gamble. Kind of like did that for 2 or 3 years, ran their pet food business, and then ran their Gillette grooming business. And then I also decided that, selling that sort of stuff was just not of interest to me. And I thought, why don't I just go follow my dreams, which was I wanted to be an actor. So I basically spent 10 years being an actor across all sorts of I suppose, mediums. I get stage, radio, TV, film. But as happens, acting was not the most reliable career. So I had ran sort of my own business on the side, which was consulting and supporting theatre and arts companies with their marketing. And then 2020, I got into crypto, as a lot of us did, and it was just like completely all consuming and all life changing, and I just couldn't get enough. And that's how I kind of came across well, you wonderful people at Neo Tokyo. Was OG Minter, which I still feel so proud of, because I mean I just think back at all the things we had to, all the hoops we had to jump through, and learning how to mint through contract at a high speed was I still think fondly of those days. So met some really, really great people, and that's why I keep raving about Neo Tokyo to everybody that I meet, as Simon mentioned. And obviously started NGMI Lab with some really talented folk over that I met in Neo Tokyo, and eventually that led me to realize how powerful the niche in Web3 gaming was. I've always been a quote unquote gamer, but I really, really enjoyed seeing what was coming out from that side of the industry. And the more sort of I researched and I did into it, the more I wanted to be on the game side and really kind of be part of it, rather than being on the outside looking in. As you may know, I joined sort of AOF first a little bit middle of last year, late last year, and then moved to Mighty Bear in March, when I spoke to Simon, and was really completely sold on what the amazing opportunity that Mighty Bear Games has. So, why don't I let Michael introduce himself, and then we can talk about our new initiative.
That sounds good. Yeah, I don't want to hold up you too much to share more of the alpha, what we're building. But yeah, it's good to have you, Coco. You just joined us recently, and we've seen a big impact in what you've been doing so far. So my background, my role first, I'm the Web3 lead at Mighty Bear Games. I've been with the studio for about 2.5 years now. So I joined when Mighty Bear Games was just entering the Web3 space. So basically doing transition from Web2 to Web3. And I helped the studio to kind of, wrap their heads around what's Web3 gaming, also on the engineering side, smart contracts, game economy design, and how to basically use crypto properly. Simon made my job easy because he already did all the homework himself before I even joined, which I think is very important for a studio that wants to take Web3 very seriously. So that was another reason why I joined, because he was already, very bullish on this space before I even joined. And my background, so before Mighty Bear Games, I worked with a game studio in Tokyo, the real life Tokyo, where I live, called Double Jump Tokyo. We built My Crypto Heroes, which is one of the OG Web3 games. So I've been working with the Web3 company since early 2019, when literally NFTs were a side event of DEF CON in 2019. There was no talk of NFTs. It was all DeFi. And so we've been building blockchain games since then, which is very fun. It's very small and different world since then. And as Coco said, the 2021 hype year was just really, really exciting and interesting, and kind of fond memories by now. But as cycles go, I think we'll come back there. And I see the first signs now, so I'm actually very excited about what's going to happen this year and next year. That's kind of my background. And I studied economics and did a bit of engineering and programming as well. So kind of a weird double background of now doing NFT economics, game economics design, and also a bit of engineering support at Mighty Bear.
So before we jump into kind of what you guys have coming next, I do want to dig a bit into the history of the project and talk a little bit about where y'all came from. you mentioned all the different titles that y'all helped to ship, and then kind of making the call to go all in on Web3. What were some of the biggest learnings from building in Web 2, and how did those then compound to get you all to a place where you then decided you did want to go all in on Web 3? What was that inflection point? How'd you come to that decision based on your previous learnings?
Yeah, I suppose I should probably take this as a studio head. So we had a slightly, I guess, unique background as a studio because we'd always kind of built our own tech. So from the very first game that we took on, which was the first game we built was an MMORPG when we were only 9 people. So the studio was about 50. Um, Building an MMO with 9 people is not really an experience I recommend. I had hair when we started that project. I don't really have hair anymore. But nonetheless, like it was a great learning experience. So we we built our own backend, and so a lot of, I'd say almost every game out there from an independent studio uses an off-the-shelf kind of tech solution. And so we knew that over time, like this is something we've been developing for the last 7 years. We knew we could run very like complex services and kind of virtual worlds at scale, actually with a small team. So from a technological perspective, we were kind of ready. I'd actually been in crypto since 2015 as well, so I was pretty deep in the space. I'd actually been looking at it for some time, and I first looked at it in 2018. I didn't really feel the space was ready. The technology was not quite there. Things like CryptoKitties were doing quite well, but there was no kind of quote unquote games. Then in 2021, like a couple of things happened. So being based in Asia, being based in Singapore, like we got to witness what was happening firsthand with Axie. Funnily enough, like the founder of YGG, Gabby's actually was an old friend of mine in Web2. So I've known him since about 2010. And so I was seeing what was going on with him and, everything that was happening, just the madness really with YGG in the Philippines and Axie. And then on the other side of the equation, not everyone knows about this, but basically Apple made some changes to how devices are identified for advertisers in 2021 as well. And so the like TLDR on this is that basically it became incredibly expensive to market and target users with Web2 games. And so we had one game that had incredible metrics, but our cost per install went up like 7x in under a year. And so I realized that for small to mid-sized studios, actually the economics of mobile free-to-play was going to become incredibly challenging. That's been borne out. So in 2023 and 2024, a bunch of them closed down, but we identified that pretty early. And so we realized we needed to shift to a different platform. And then, given our technological foundation and my passion for crypto and Web3 in any case, I was a early Doodles buyer and pretty active in the NFT communities. I felt like this was a pretty safe bet for us. And so we took a lot of the experience we had in Web2. So Mighty Action Heroes, our first game, really borrows a lot from 2 previous Web2 games we'd made. And so we decided to execute on something we knew we could deliver. 3 teams, obviously, kind of well documented, struggled to ship games. So we shipped our first title within, I want to say 6 months of us starting in Web3, which is like pretty much unheard of. But yeah, that's kind of how we came to this point. I was very lucky that we found Michael very early on. And so he helped, as he mentioned, kind of get the wider team to understand the space, because trying to onboard 40 people from Web2 all at once is no kind of small feat.
Interesting. I think a lot of people would actually say that Web3 is more risky. And so it's quite interesting to hear you say that the safer play was to go into Web3. Can you maybe linger on that for a little bit and just kind of give more detail on what exactly you mean by that? How are you making that risk to reward calculation?
Yeah, of course. I mean, the very mid-curve take would be to say, like there's all this money in Web2 and all these users, it's a safer bet. But actually the economics just don't scale for small studios. So, when you're trying to acquire and onboard users, if every user you bring into your, we'll call it project in Web2, because of the cost of mobile user acquisition is, I don't know, maybe say $10 more than you expect to get on a per user basis, then the economics just don't work. We were seeing cost per install of close to $10, and at the same time, we were expecting to make $2 to $3 back from those users. Whereas previously, like we may have acquired a user for like $1, $1.50, and made $2 to $3 from them. And so, with the changes that started to affect the industry in 2021, like that, it became very clear to me that those economics don't scale. And so, yeah, I mean, to my point, like we've seen it borne out with a bunch of studios closing down now in the last couple of years in Web 2. And the only studios that can really afford to do kind of Web 2 mobile free to play right now are either studios that are using a massive IP, so, like say Marvel, or the Supercell IPs, because people will just download those games based on the name. You don't have to market them. All games kind of pushed out by these mega studios that can then just use their, marketing network to drive users between, like existing users between their different games. And so that's essentially how they make the economics go in Web 2 mobile. I mean, to this point, it's not really an open secret because it's completely open, but my partner is actually a VC at a gaming fund. And if you look at the deals that the gaming funds are doing in VC as well, this is reflected. Like no one is investing in mobile kind of free to play, Web 2 free to play, because the economics just don't scale. And then if you think about console and PC, like the cost of developing a project is 8 figures. Like it's just not really an option for a small to mid-sized studio. So this was kind of the only kind of smart play, unless you wanted to take something really risky, like start developing VR and hope that one day people will start buying headsets. But that wasn't really a bet I was willing to make.
And so was going into, and please, the rest of the guests, please feel free to chime in. So going into the Web3 space seems like it is the only option, but does that help with your cost per install? And so, or does it help with the lifetime value to customer? Like how does Web3 actually solve those problems?
That's an excellent question. So I guess I'll answer this one and I'll let the other guys kind of take this on. But essentially, it helps with both. But I'm more focused on the cost per install because whereas in, Web 2, and I've actually writing a thread about this right now, but close to 75% of every dollar, so 75 cents on the dollar is basically going back to a combination of Meta, Apple, and Google, depending on the platform you're on and the advertising mix, right? So $25 of every kind of dollar spent is going back to the developer. In Web3, we can kind of change that mix completely. So that user acquisition spend can go back to the community. You can create community incentives. People start sharing the game or bringing other people into the network and kind of reward the people that contribute the most to the ecosystem's growth. I think that's a very unique unlock, and that's kind of what excites me more than anything, because that is incredibly scalable. Like with the right incentives, you can kind of almost like Neotopia, right? You can kind of scale your community hugely at a fraction of the cost that you would in Web 2. Revenue, maximizing kind of customer value is, I suppose, good business practice, but it's not really our focus right now, given how small the space is. For us, it's really about trying to grow the space, and we have something we're working on right now that we think is going to help with that as well, but kind of to make the pie as big as possible. Coco, do you have anything you want to say on this? Because this is kind of your domain.
Yeah, no, I think you made a really good point about one of the things that I think is really important is removing that walled garden effect, the sort of gatekeepers, and being able to connect directly with your target audience. But in terms of how the technology is solving some of those issues, it's not just that it's solving it, but it's just that it breaks open this kind of decades old playbook and allows us to be creative again around how we can connect with audiences. Some of the challenges that I'm looking at, for example, is how do we work with influencers, for example. And historically, it's been that there are some ways of tracking influencer ROI, but with crypto and, for example, with soulbound tokens, you can really connect what an influencer's audience, who they are via their wallet, by say an influencer can give a soulbound token for an event to their audience, and then you can track the spend, for example, or you can track what they went on to do because of their wallet connection. And I'm also talking to companies who are kind of connecting the dots between Twitter personality or profile and their wallet, and understanding if someone bought this token and that token, how can we build a profile around what they could buy in the future. And in general, I think that the overall spend per user in crypto is higher, and I think that the data is definitely been showing that so far. But yeah, in terms of like how we talk about, for example, NFTs as well, I think being able to unlock a different business model to what we're used to is really freeing. So I think in terms of a lot of existing studios, for example, would always want to sell you an item, right? They wouldn't give it away for free, because if you sell a seasonal pass or something, that is the moment that you make the revenue. Whereas if you look at it from an NFT perspective, you could, in theory, give it away for free and make money. In theory, I guess, if there was royalties enforced, but from the trade that happens ongoing. And so that kind of gives a lot more freedom and shares and distributes the revenue between the users and the business, and kind of cuts out that middleman a bit more, which I think gives more power to the businesses and the players themselves.
Also, adding to what Coco said, I mean, it's kind of like a new playbook where you also turn your community members into ambassadors. I mean, you've seen it with your community as well, and I mean, a lot of other game communities where if they're like, it's a lot of, how do I put it? It's basically a community centric approach to user acquisition. So instead of just paying ad networks to get individuals, you basically build a community of folks that really stand behind you, and you incentivize them by giving them, a bit of a say in the ecosystem, and also, let's say, NFTs, or if they have tokens, that kind of amplifies their voice, because they're also incentivized to kind of grow the community because they hold NFTs and they hold tokens. And as projects, you can distribute NFTs, you can distribute tokens as part of user acquisition, and kind of amplifying, people to talk about your project. So I think that's another big difference, because you can bootstrap these communities much easier than in Web 2, because Web 2 you need deeper pockets, whereas in Web 3, again, you have NFTs, you have tokens for user acquisition as well. And to Coco's point, I think that whole LTV calculation is a bit different, whereas like if you have a strong community, those community members stick around and they invite other community members. So that's kind of like a bit of a different math than just looking over a lifetime of one game. You can look at like over a lifetime of like multiple games in a game ecosystem that you're building, for example. And we'll get more into that thinking, I think, later when Coco shares more what we're building. But I hope that helps a bit to understand how we're thinking about this.
Absolutely. And then jumping into kind of the first stab into, or at least the first initiative into the Web3 space, maybe y'all can kind of talk us through. Okay, you moved from Web 2 to Web 3. You saw these issues going on. You've realized that, 4D chess, you have to make this move, which is actually very interestingly reminiscent of how Michael Saylor got to Bitcoin. So maybe y'all are the Michael Saylor of Web3 gaming, which would be awesome. But anyways, that being said, what was then your approach? You're like, all right, Web3 is the play. Maybe kind of take us through like the next set of moves that y'all made, of like, okay, this is the type of game we want to build. This is how we're gonna put in the different Web3 connective tissue pieces within this, and then just maybe kind of tell us that story, which I think will lead us perfectly into the next big step for y'all.
Do you want to take this, Michael? Because you were a key part of that.
Yeah, I mean, I could also take a bit of a step back, Ben, if that's fine, just to explain a bit how, I guess,
Please.
the first year looked like of going to Web 3. So what most people don't really realize or recognize is when you turn a Web 2 company into a Web 3 company, there's a lot of mindset building that needs to happen. I think a lot of us that are deep in Web 3, they do the homework themselves, and they're generally curious about what's going on. Then they become degens, then they ape into some projects, get rugged here and there. Like you basically learn as you go. There's no documentation of like reading up on. I mean, now there's more than there used to be, but a lot of this, like what we basically did in the early days, is we gave everybody in the company a small NFT budget to just buy NFTs, join communities, and kind of participate, because that's the best way to learn. And some of us actually got rugged or got scammed or clicked on the phishing link, which honestly are great experiences, because we've all been there. And and then once they know the feeling of like owning something that might go up, that might go down, like even also having an NFT that loses value is an important experience, because you understand how users might feel if the project doesn't do well. And that was basically the first 6 months. And naturally, also a lot of folks in the studio, they signed up for Web2's journey, building games with Apple Arcade that we did before, or with Disney. And naturally, not for everybody, Web3 was a fit. So for those, we also looked out for them and kind of helped them find a new home in another studio where their skills are basically a better fit. So there was a bit of like a change in the studio where like some folks left and then new folks joined, and a few Web3 native folks like Coco. We did another very important hire, Terry, and then a few other people that are a bit more crypto native than I would say the average, not average, but like the majority of the people in the studio. And then also among the leadership team with Simon, Ben, the other co-founder, Asaf is also listening. All of us basically had to have a very good, deep, fundamental understanding of crypto. So there's basically the first year was a lot of learning and ramp up, and shipping Mighty Action Heroes was also a lot of learnings where like instead of planning for 6 months or 9 months for a game with Disney, you basically ship a very early version for the Web3 space that's very iterative. So that also took a bit of a mindset change of how people build games in our studio, because before it was extremely polished. I mean, it's still very polished, but like we were happy to start with we call it an MAP, like a minimum awesome product, just like the minimum features, launch this and then iterate from there, instead of having like a full-fledged game that you launch, which I think that's what you have to do. I mean, in Web 2. So that was also a bit of, again, mindset change where we changed a bit. We think about sprints, meaning that instead of planning out every 2-3 weeks, what we plan out every week because things are moving a bit faster. And also at the same time, just kind of getting comfortable that we might not really have all the answers to what we're building, and kind of sharing the learning. So Mighty Action Heroes now segue now into what we're building with the platform. But Mighty Action Heroes basically helped us a lot to understand the audience we're building for, which we identified that basically if you have money, or like if you put a play with value at stake, that's more exciting for the 3 players than having, let's say, a free-to-play game where you can earn a few of NFTs here and there. What I mean by this is specifically we added a feature called Showdown Matches. So Mighty Action Heroes is basically a battle royale with 20 players, but we added a mode that is a 1-versus-1 showdown match where you buy in with crowns, and crowns is basically an off-chain currency, and then you compete with crowns, and the winner gets the crowns from the loser. So it's 1-versus-1. And that with that specific feature, we actually saw our retention going up by like significantly. I think we had like a 1-day retention of 80% of players that played that specific mode, which was something that we were obviously positively surprised. So once we saw that, we were like, okay, we're probably onto something here, and let's turn this into the direction of the ecosystem what we're building. And I'll pause here. I'll leave it to Simon or Coco. Coco raised her hand.
Can I just say really quickly that is an unbelievably big brain thing to do, is to give your team that is migrating from Web 2 to Web 3 a budget to play around in the NFT world. I mean, that is like the single best way that I've ever heard to actually get people into the ecosystem. So GG on that one. And then also following that up with another enormously big brain move, which is to bring on Coco. So, I mean, GG on all those things. Anyways, please continue.
Ben, that's really funny you say that, because I think when Simon first told me that, my mind was also kind of blown. I was like, that's exactly what is needed to do the rapid learning that happens in Web3. It's like you've just got to have like real money at stake. But I just wanted to actually pick up one thing before we move on to sort of the big new initiative, is something that kind of Michael touched on, which I think is really important for Web2 studios moving into Web3, and just in general, like how we approach Web3 gaming. And that is like the approach to building games. We have like a process and a standard that we're used to in Web2. And now that we are sort of directing our attention to a new audience that has different priorities and is much more of a mixed player base, including investors and NFT traders and all that, is really important. And I think this is what I really loved about Mighty Bear Games when I kind of first met and spoke to Simon. was the fact that there was real work done on thinking about how you bring a game to market and how you tailor it to that audience in a number of different ways. And one of those ways is challenging that kind of idea that games take time, right? Because I think we heard it quite a lot in the industry where we have projects that start and then like year, 2 years, 5 years, right? And we're still waiting for a game. And what we have seen this time and time again, where that model of like starting a community, and when you start a community in Web3, you have to realize that people have things at stake inside your community, and waiting 5 years for a game is going to inevitably cause a reduction in your community. Waiting is can only be waited for as long as somebody's got a patience for it. But really, like, look at that process. Like, can you reduce that process? Does every single part of the production flow need to be there? How can you improve it and expedite it? And so when I saw that the studio is like really looking into that and thinking about shipping games down from a year to 6 months, 6 months to a month, and how they're achieving that is super important, I think, because you have to start tailoring the product to the audience. And if you're going for Web3, you just got to understand that mindset. And I think, I'm sure, Simon, maybe I'll let you talk about the AI side of things, because we do have a lot of work done on that side of things, which include beyond sort of optimizing processes, but also using and leveraging our own AI models. But yeah, I don't know if you want to ask any questions around that, and then maybe we can move on to the new initiative that we keep teasing.
I mean, just a comment. It's incredibly interesting to think about releasing the simplest version of a playable thing, and then having the people give you feedback in the form of hard statistics on playtime and retention, and then being able to then take that information and pivot the initiative, I guess you would say, or the ecosystem into that direction. One of the things that might be a word of caution would be, or a question out of a sense of caution would be, how do you know when you have enough data to be able to make that sort of decision to pivot an ecosystem based on, how do you know when it's statistically significant versus, maybe you just had a bunch of people fired up that day, but it doesn't actually mean something?
Yeah, I think to answer your question, it's basically just determined by cohort size. So, we did some campaigns in India with KGen and Philippines with YGG, and those guys have huge communities. And so when you start seeing thousands or tens of thousands of players coming as part of a specific campaign, like, those numbers tend to be statistically significant, just the volume of people coming in. Obviously, those guys have their own motivations, but in any case, when you have that many players, it also means that the match quality is kind of more indicative for the wider community, because we have a multiplayer game. So if you don't have loads of concurrence, it's not a fantastic experience. So it was primarily actually just through activations with other partners, just to make sure we had enough players at the same time, kind of trying out the different experiences. Sorry, my cat is yelling into the mic. Yeah, that was it basically. And I think it also comes from experience. Like, I've been shipping online games for since nearly 15 years now. So I guess you start to get an idea when a cohort is kind of significant and when it isn't. The only risk is with releasing products so early, you sometimes get kind of a backlash from the community because they don't really understand that it's like very work in progress. You're just trying to assess how things are going, and then anyone that's looking at it and comparing it to it's obviously it's going to have a very negative impression, because those are games that people spend.
Sorry, Simon, real quick. We're losing your mic and your voice a bit.
Oh, sorry about that.
I think your cat is disturbing you.
Yeah, he is. He's a terror. No, I was just saying that, one of the issues with doing that is that it can sometimes give people a false impression, especially when they're comparing against box products. So if they're comparing to, say, like a PS5 game or an Xbox game, and you're showing something that's been built in just a few months versus 10 years, then they can come away with a negative impression. So I think the biggest challenge is that on the community side, like helping people understand that you're building a game with them and you're building with the community, and we're all about shipping and shipping fast. But yeah, no, not every community member is always going to buy into that.
Oh, that cat is cracking me up. You gotta love cats. I'm just imagining them, like him or her, just diving for the mic, having something to say. They're the freaking
That's
best.
exactly what he's doing. Yeah, he's a terror. He's the worst. But yeah.
So I know you guys have a big initiative that's coming up, so we won't hold the audience back any longer. Feel free to dive into it, Coco or Michael or Simon.
Yeah, cool. I'll take the easy side of this, and I'll let Simon and Michael take the hard bits. So yeah, we're launching our next initiative, and I think it's born out of a lot of the learnings that we kind of recently just mentioned. And it's called Goat Gaming. So Goat Gaming essentially is a platform, and it's our super platform for PvP games with prizes. And all the games on Goat Gaming are curated by us and united by a general theme of PvP games with prizes. And the super thing about it is that the platform also provides infrastructure, and it's speaking back to what Simon mentioned about how we've spent a lot of time building our own backend, our own tech stack, and this tech stack can be available in the future to other studios, other devs, and that includes both a Web3 side of things, so wallet integration, NFTs, etc., and then the very important Web2 infrastructure, which makes like games really great. Things like skill-based matchmaking, leaderboards, guilds, live ops, and such. And those two elements basically solve the challenges of many studios out there, whether it's a Web2 studio that's kind of a bit clueless about how to get into Web3 and how to turn their game more Web3 focused, or a Web3, say, IP that is perhaps struggling, that is a great IP and very well known or something, but doesn't, and wants to go into gaming, but necessarily doesn't have all that tech available. And so what we provide is sort of like the rapid deployment of those games on our platform, and it allows them to have PvP elements as well. And then it also will serve as discovery and distribution through the Goat Gaming platform. So that's essentially, in a nutshell, what we're doing. And obviously, for the first few months, to sort of showcase what we can do and how the platform works, we'll be launching quite rapidly a succession of games that we've been sort of building in the back at the moment. And so that it comes hot off the press because we've only just launched the trailer on Monday, and we are due to go live, I believe, tomorrow. So that is it in a nutshell.
That's so much alpha. Awesome. Thank you, Coco. I mean, yeah, I hope everybody knows that, again, what Coco said is a lot of alpha. So keep an eye on Goat Gaming. As she said, tomorrow we will have a bigger announcement to make and just kind of share a bit of the vision of Goat Gaming, I guess, more to the user side. And, for context, I'm the product lead for Goat Gaming, so I've been heads down building over the last few weeks and even months to build up to the launch this week. And yeah, so in terms of the vision, something that we've also seen in Web3 gaming is that when you have a games platform with a lot of different games, it's very intimidating to jump into new games because a lot of the new games, they have a different economy, they have different NFTs, they have different game design. Like, it just takes you a lot of time to study and getting very deep when you jump into a new game. But with Goat Gaming, we want to make it very simple for the players to say, games are better with prizes. Very simple. You compete against other players. We will have crowns as a currency that spans across all the games on Goat Gaming. So basically, you buy crowns, you compete against other players, and then you can redeem the crowns. That's coming soon. I'm not sure, Coco, if you want to share some alpha on this, but I'll hold off for now. I'm gonna want to save some alpha for the next few weeks. But yeah, you'll be able to redeem crowns at a later point, and that's kind of the core to the experience. So every single game that we're building and shipping, and as Coco mentioned, we have a few games in the pipeline that we're building with studios that we're close with. and all those games will be quite similar in that experience, meaning that you play with crowns, you compete against others, and then the winner gets the crowns. So if you jump into a new game, you know what's going on. I mean, basically, you enter a game with crowns and you compete, but the gameplay experience is going to be different. So there's different genres, there's different game mechanics, but the overall like meta gameplay and game economy is going to be very simple and similar. So it's easy for users to kind of like jump between games. That's kind of what we also have seen, because right now there's a lot of fatigue, I think, to like jump into new Web3 games. Because again, every game has different token unlocks, different NFTs, how to earn. You have to stay on top of all these things. So there's a lot of like mental cost starting a new game. So we want to kind of like reduce that mental cost so that when you play on Goat Gaming, you can try different games and have a good experience. And that's also like very smooth in terms of UX.
I guess maybe an analogy you could use, like depending on how old you are, is perhaps like the mini clip of Web3 or Newgrounds or Kongregate. So, one portal with hundreds of instant games you can just jump into, and these would be across multiple different platforms. So, some may not be on browser, they could be on kind of a mobile platform, or they could be in UGC platforms. And so it's kind of a place where you can, play instant games regardless of kind of wherever you are and whatever your kind of favorite platform is. But yeah, the idea is to have hundreds of games you can just jump into instantly.
Yeah, I love the idea of having just a platform that gamers can go to and get access to a bunch of different games. Obviously, the gamers will be coming for those games. So, really, my question is, what sort of is the strategy in order to onboard like the critical mass amount of games to sort of gain traction and sort of get that snowball effect of users?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how much I can really reveal. So, Coco, feel free to just interrupt me if I'm if I'm sharing too much. So, Mighty Action Heroes is going to be integrated into this platform. The game has had, I think, close to 1 million plays already, and is going live on globally on iOS pretty soon. It's already live globally on Android. In addition to that, we have a sub studio of Mighty Bear called the Legit Games Company. So it's public information. And so it's been one of the top 20 performers globally, actually, in UEFN and Fortnite. And so we've been using that as an R&D platform for our Web3 games. So we can build a Fortnite game in under a week, which is pretty spectacular, which is why we've shipped, I think, close to 30. I think it's between 25 and 30 now. And so we're building hooks from Fortnite back to Goat Gaming and finding ways to drive some of those millions of players that we've had in Fortnite to Goat Gaming to help kind of onboard the critical mass. And then there's other things that we're also doing in Web3 and perhaps collaborations even. But yeah, maybe I'll let you pick it up from here, Coco.
Yeah, I mean, that was it in a nutshell. And what I think is like really exciting, and I'm not very good at explaining it, which is the AI side of it. I think AI has massively helped the studio to be able to say things like we can ship a game in under a week. And the sort of beauty of that is that if we've built the AI models and generative AI in a way that is using our own data. So that means that we have the IP to all the sort of the AI that comes out of the studio. And I think that's a very important distinction. And on top of that, the AI that you see that kind of is employed by the general public is a generalized AI, and this AI tools that we're building actually has much more of a refined mold ability to like mold to what we need for a game studio, like the details of the artwork. If you've seen some of these like AI built games out in the market, some of them are very low quality, so I think that there's kind of a bit of a perception that these AI games aren't good, and that's because they're probably using the generalized tools like ChatGPT out there, but our AI is actually our own inbuilt AI. And so when you can ship these games once a week, not only are we on the UFN side, a couple of things that kind of come to mind is that you can do that all important work of failing fast, because we know that in gaming it's a hits driven business. Majority of ideas that come out of a studio probably will fail. and that's the reality. But if you can optimize that flow in a way that you can just drop it and find something that works, and then when something does hit, you can really kind of double down on it and put your resources behind it. And actually, we've seen that in action in our studio. We have we have like 30 games, because we started only a few months ago with the UEFN, and we have like 30 games on that UEFN side, and we've seen a few hits. One of which is a game called Waifu Tycoon, and that is generating revenue for us as we speak. And that revenue then can flow back to sort of the stakeholders in our ecosystem. And that is, entirely driven by Web 2 players who don't even need to know about Web 3. They don't even need to be part of the ecosystem, but they're still actually contributing to a Web 3 ecosystem, which I think is pretty cool. And kind of a different take on bringing the masses into Web 3, because they don't necessarily have to actually be integrated into the Goat Gaming platform. Once Goat Gaming is actually live, there will always be an option for players who play our UEFN games. So once they sort of finish the game and win or something, they will have a QR code, which they will get the opportunity to redeem some crowns on our platform. So it's a very optional, a very light touch method, because actually our whole platform is geared towards and focusing on the Web3 player. But that is kind of our way of, it's one of the doors that we're kind of exploring to on-ramp sort of the masses into Web3 in this way.
Yeah, I love the idea of just putting out a ton of hooks with like that minimal awesome product, and then being able to water the seeds that actually grow and start to take. I think it's a really interesting and cool approach. We're getting pretty close to the top of the hour, so I want to take the opportunity to turn things back around to see, were there any topics that we didn't get a chance to talk about earlier in the segment? Any sort of alpha that you guys have left in the tank, or anything you want to dive into before we wrap? Please take the opportunity now to do so.
Yeah, I suppose I should. I'm going to share some alpha that's probably going to, Coco's probably going to punch me in the face later. But at a high level, look, we released Mighty Action Heroes in, I want to say like late 2021, in 2022. And so the game has been live for a while now. It has 2 NFT collections, Big Bear Syndicate, Mighty Net Genesis Pass. I would say that with everything that's coming in Goat Gaming, it might not be a bad time to hold one of those 2 collections. The Big Bear Syndicate is especially, I would say, well priced right now. Yeah, I suppose that's all I can say actually on that. And then the other alpha point about I'd say is like follow at Play Goat Gaming. And make sure that you have your notifications turned on, because we have a bunch of stuff that's dropping in the next few days, and there's going to be some really cool opportunities there. Yeah, don't say that we didn't tell you. Anything you want to add, Coco or Michael?
I would just say, yeah, I mean, exactly to your point, follow Play Goat Gaming. We're putting all of our sort of first stuff out there. Currently, there is a cheeky pre-mint link out available with our latest tweet, so might not do you too much harm to sign up to that. And as Simon says, like I think that there's a really good value on the market for the Big Bear syndicates, and in particular at the moment.
I like the alpha. You all spilled the beans. Coco, why is there a pre-mint link? Can you tell us more?
Yeah, sure. The pre-mint link is to do with what we call the Goat Summoning, and that is going to be an initiative that comes to fruition in July. Why not? I'll just mention it. So it's essentially our PFP collection, and we're going to be sort of creating the Goat layer, identity layer, for our community to kind of really bring that community to life behind a PFP. And so we are actually doing a big mint in July that will kind of bring together the old and the new all under one unifying brand of Goat Gaming. Because as you know, we've come from the the Bear and the Mighty Bear. Well, we are the Mighty Bear Games Studio, but we have like the Big Bear Syndicate NFTs, and we have MightyNet Genesis Pass. And for context, MightyNet was actually the original name for Goat Gaming. So the what we're building with Goat Gaming has always been in the pipeline. It was just called MightyNet, but having sort of been in space for quite some time, considering who our audience is, we decided to go with sort of a more Web3 native name, and something that's kind of a little bit less on the mighty and more on sort of gaming and degens.
Yeah, and to kind of, call out the alpha that we shared at Mighty Bear Games, and also in the ecosystem we're building, we're looking out for our community members. So as Coco mentioned, we bring together the old and the new. That's the alpha.
Yeah, I like the idea that it's really important for us to recognize that we do have like an existing community that's been with us for a really long time. And I think Simon mentioned, he's been in Doodles for quite some time. Michael, you're a member of a number of communities. We're all in the team. We're all kind of members of communities, and we know the challenges it takes to build a community and some of the pitfalls that you can fall into if you don't really take care of your community. So I do want to kind of hammer home the point that everything we do and the decisions that we make are with a community facing mindset. That how will these existing OG community members feel, and will they feel taken care of? And I like to think that we put them in the forefront of our minds in every single decision that we've made.
Whoops, I accidentally muted myself. Yeah, you can't really argue with that. And I appreciate y'all dropping the alpha and making sure that we understood the alpha and had a couple of action items available to us so that we could jump in and be mighty with y'all. So I just want to thank you so very much for jumping on to the AMA with us today and for talking about a little bit of your history, both personally as well as the project. Hey, got to this point, some of the learnings, and then the big news. And I wish y'all the very best of luck here moving forward with the next iteration and the next big chapter here. Y'all are absolutely friends of the Neo Tokyo AMA team and the pod. So feel free to come back at any time, and maybe we could do a breakdown of what happened after this next era. So just want to thank y'all very very much for coming on to the AMA today, and yeah, we'll excitedly see you next time.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. It was a lot of fun.